Welcome to Eastman's Podcast Edition. I'm Mike Eastman, your host. I have a special guest today. We're going to talk to Congressman Clyde, who's from Georgia, I believe, and we'll talk a little bit on his background and where he comes from. We'll also talk about a bunch of cool things that are happening in D.C. and a bunch of things that we all need to be aware of that are happening in D.C. So without that, Mr. Congressman, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Ike. I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So kind of give us a little bit background. Where in Georgia are you from? And you grew up there, kind of childhood stuff, just a little background.
Well, first off, I live in Georgia. I'm the northeast corner. I'm the representative. I'm the 9th district representative. That includes Gainesville and pretty much from there all the way to the Tennessee border and to the North and South Carolina border, that whole northeast corner of Georgia. I think it's the most beautiful part of the entire state. So a little shout out to the folks of the 9th district there.
Yeah.
But started life off really as a Navy officer, went to private Christian school and then to the University of Notre Dame for my ROTC. Was
fine Irish.
A Navy officer. Then from there spent 11 years active, 17 reserve, primarily in the aviation side, aircraft carriers, was in a fighter squadron and air stations, etc. And then transitioned to the Navy Reserve as a construction battalion, as a Navy Seabee. And so spent 3 combat deployments overseas in Iraq and Kuwait, supporting the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force and the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force as a Seabee, as a member of the construction battalion. And during that time frame, during that transition from active duty to reserve, I went to the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. Go Dogs!
They did really well this year.
They did. 2nd year national champions, college football, and we're going to try and make that a 3rd year. So
right. Now I know why you and Baker are friends.
Hey, being a dog fan is a great place to be.
Yep, that's right. Well, thank you for your service. I know that's not that you get that a lot, but I want you to understand that we all very much mean it. It is something that you put you and your family through, and me and my family very much appreciate that.
Well, thank you. It is an honor to serve our nation, to wear its cloth and to defend its flag and to defend its Constitution. And I did that, as a Navy officer, and then also after I graduated from Georgia with my master's in business, I kind of took my little hobby business, which was as a federal firearms licensee, and I made that a business for real. Something that I wanted to do to put food on the table. And when you think about federal firearms licensees, I really consider them to be constitutional businesses.
Yeah.
Because they are truly the link between the manufacturer of firearms and the individual consumer. And without that ability to go and purchase a firearm from a federal firearms licensee, then you're just not going to be able to access your Second Amendment rights like
That's
you
right.
should. So
They're a conduit,
I think,
for sure.
Yeah, and so the motto of my company was we enable individual participation in the preservation of liberty. And so I looked at my company as being an extension of my military service, but now for civilians in protecting and defending the Constitution of the United States. And I still see that in what I'm doing right now as a member of Congress. Our job is to defend the Constitution and therefore preserve people's liberty.
And not just the Second Amendment, but all of them.
That's right. Not just the Second Amendment. Well, the most important is the first, because that's our ability to speak, to communicate our grievances to the government, to present our political views, and that never, ever, ever can be, crushed or silenced or canceled, I guess is the right word for this, for for our current society, and the government can never be a part of that.
That's right.
Um, so we have to fight for that and defend that each and every day, because the cancel culture is real. They don't want you to let your voice be heard. They want to
Yeah,
silence you, especially if you don't agree with what the elites or the socialists want. If
that's
you're
right.
a freedom-loving American, then I want your voice to be heard. And the Second Amendment is the teeth behind the First Amendment. And
Yep.
people need to understand that, which is why it's so critical and so vital to preserve and protect that Second Amendment.
That's a
Because
very interesting way to put that, that the Second Amendment is the teeth behind the First Amendment. I'm not sure I've heard that very often, but you're
Mhm.
100% right. The First Amendment is what we all appreciate. The Second Amendment's how we get to appreciate it.
That's right. You're
That's
exactly
awesome.
right, Ike.
That's awesome.
That's well put. And so for me, being a federal firearms licensee was just it was a love that I've had for a long time. I love guns. I love shooting. I enjoy hunting, and I just love seeing people have that ability to defend their liberty. I think it makes our country more safe. I think it preserves liberty to the extent for future generations, and I just enjoy being part of it.
So,
And
so in lieu of that, what are some of the things that you're facing there in Congress right now, and that you're seeing in DC that our people, that some of the fights that you're up against right now? I know there's a few, but I have a couple that I would like to discuss. But what are the ones that are really on the hot plate right now for you?
well, I think the one that is really center focus on the hot plate is the pistol brace rule by ATF. They came out on January the 13th, and with their final rule that reclassified pistols with arm braces as short-barreled rifles. And to me, that is a tremendous overreach of government authority. They don't have the authority to do that because they're really redefining a definition, and they're making pistols with braces that have been approved by the ATF for over a decade. In fact, the ATF approved them in 2012, and then when they started to become popular, um, they had second thoughts in 2015, and then said, well, hey, you can't put them up to your shoulder. And then in 2017, they said, oh, well, yes, you can, as long as you don't change the design of it. The intended design is as a brace for your arm, especially for those who may have physical difficulties or are older, that don't have the strength in their arm or their hand, or those who are disabled veterans,
Yeah.
who have defended our nation, and as a result now have either lost another limb or just are physically unable to hold up the larger pistols, and they want to enjoy their sport of going to the range and shooting. And so these pistol braces help them. And so that was the initial thought of it. And I agree that ATF should have uh, approved them. And now, though, after having approved them in 12, kind of somewhat rescinding them in 15, reapproving them in 17, now in 2023, here we are over a decade later, saying, oh no, I'm sorry, but now we have to reclassify them as short-barreled rifles. And if you don't register your pistol brace firearm, then in 120 days you are going to have broken the law. It's a felony, and you're subject to now 10 years in prison, $250,000 fine, and will lose your right to own a firearm for the rest of your life. That's
Wow.
unconscionable. It's
Wow.
inexcusable. It's a tremendous breach of trust from the executive branch to the American people, and it's something that Congress needs to step in and stop. And we have the authority to do it.
Yes.
We can do that in a number of ways. The first is we can introduce legislation to eliminate short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns from the National Firearms Act, so that ATF no longer has the authority to regulate them as a restricted firearm. And we have done that through the SHORT Act, Stop Harassing Owners of Rifles Today Act. And that was introduced in the Senate by Senator Marshall, and I introduced it here in the House. And that's one way we can do it, passing it through just changing the law. The second way we can do it is through a Congressional Review Act. Congress has the ability, the authority to review every solitary rule of the executive branch and decide, well, whether this rule complies with the laws that Congress has passed. And in this case, it clearly does not comply with the laws that Congress has passed, because Congress passed these laws like decades ago, and now ATF is this year changing the definition. That's unacceptable, and that's unpatriotic, and that's unconstitutional. And so we are going to fight this by here next week. I'm going to introduce the Congressional Review Act Resolution of Disapproval. It's going to be introduced by myself, along with Richard Hudson, our conference whip here, and then in the House and in the Senate, Senator Marshall and Senator Kennedy are jointly introducing it in the Senate. We have over 160 co-sponsors right now in the House on this piece of legislation. I'm real proud of that, and it will. I believe it will pass the House, and then goes over to the Senate, and I believe the Senate will pass it as well, and because it does not require the 60 vote threshold. It is a privileged resolution, and it only requires a majority in the Senate. I think we've got enough Second Amendment folks, maybe like Senator Manchin or Senator Sinema, that would support that, and then and we can strike the rule down that way. But if that doesn't work, we have a third way, and that's called a limitation amendment within the House Appropriations Committee. And I happen to sit on that committee, and I am on the subcommittee of Commerce, Justice, and Science. And the important part of that is justice, because my subcommittee controls the budget for the Department of Justice, which means it controls it for the FBI and for the ATF. And we can do a limitation amendment, which basically says that no money can be spent on the implementation of this particular pistol brace rule, and that will defund it. Simply make it evaporate, make it go away. If no money can be spent on its enforcement, then it doesn't exist. So that's the third way to do it that Congress has, and we're gonna take care of this one way or another. And then, of course, the fourth way that we have seen throughout the nation is the multiple lawsuits that have been filed in support of the Constitution, in support of limited government, in support of the separation of powers between the House and the executive, between Congress and the executive. And I think that they have a great opportunity to strike down this rule as well. Just like the bump stock rule came out in 2017, was struck down by the Fifth Circuit on January the 6th of this year. But it took 6 years, and we can't afford 6 years through the courts. The courts are a very slow way to get things done.
Yes. So let me ask you a couple things about the pistol brace. I understand why you would need the pistol brace. I understand. What is the opposition's worry about the pistol brace, or is it just one thing that they're trying to find a chink in the Second Amendment armor? I mean, can you explain to us what their thoughts are, why they want to regulate it?
Well, I can certainly speculate on it, and
Yes,
I believe it's because they want to expand the national registry, the NFRTR, the National Firearms Registration and Transfer Record, because the more that they can get people on that registration, on that record, the more they have insight into who owns what. And as we all know, throughout history, what comes before confiscation is registration.
Yes.
You have to register it before you confiscate it. And we've seen that in Australia. We saw that prior to World War II in Nazi Germany. We've seen that in numerous countries throughout the world, in And I'm just not a fan of that. In fact, it violates our Constitution. And I think that, honestly, I think the National Firearms Act should go away. I think it's unconstitutional as well. But I think their entire intent is to expand the registry, and then to potentially make felons of American citizens so they can't own firearms
Right.
anymore. And both of them are nefarious.
I agree. So the short act, I believe, is what you're using it and calling it. Explain to me and in the audience what's the teeth in that, and what is it? Is it a permanent thing? Is it just for the pistol brace, or can it be applied to other portions of the firearm industry down the road? For instance, the black gun controversy or whatever they drum up next. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. It would be an absolutely a permanent solution, because it would eliminate short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns. And a short-barreled shotgun is any shotgun that has a barrel less than 18 inches. Short-barreled rifle is any rifle that has a barrel less than 16 inches in length. It would eliminate those from the National Firearms Act of 1934, or the NFA as it's commonly called. So it would eliminate ATF's authority to require those firearms to be registered.
Okay.
And if ATF doesn't have the authority to make them be registered, then it would be just like any other rifle or any other shotgun. And therefore, it would eliminate, again, that opportunity for ATF to have someone's name on a list.
Yes.
So it would be a very permanent solution. Now, in this administration with this president, it probably has the lowest chance of the three that I outlined, or maybe the four that I outlined if you include the lawsuits.
Yes.
Of being successful, but it's still an option, and we still have to try it.
I hope you're enjoying the content today. Today's episode is brought to you by Savage Arms. Now, Savage has been making firearms for a really long time, over 100 years. Now, they are what we call out-of-the-box accurate. They have some of the coolest features for an out-of-the-box rifle. The AccuTrigger, which single-handedly changed the way that my accuracy is, changed the way I shoot. I am way more accurate with that AccuTrigger because it is a two-stage trigger that has a safety on it, and when you touch the second trigger, it goes off. It's the perfect surprise. They also have the AccuStock, which takes the barrel whip out. Unbelievable accuracy with the zero headspace, which is unique to them. Now, I'm going to tell you one of the coolest things they've developed, which is called the AccuFit. Those stocks you can take off with the same rifle. I can take the comb off, the pull, adjust it for my 12-year-old daughter, and she can shoot the same rifle I did, and I don't have to redial it in. It's perfect for her. It fits her. The AccuStock, AccuTrigger, and the AccuFit are some of Savage's best-known things. Now, check them out at savagearms.com. They are coming up with new innovations every single day. They have new pistols now. It's unbelievable. Check them out.
So with the federal excise tax, and then this kind of breaches into that. I know that you've came out and talked about that act, and what is your feelings with that? Not as it pertains to the pistol brace, but as it pertains to across the board. Are you in favor of that or against it?
That would be the Return Our Constitutional Rights Act that I introduced last year. Yeah, it stands, the word return stands for, it removes the excise tax on what's an unalienable right. It's removing excise tax on unalienable rights now. That's what the word return actually means. Because here you have a constitutional right, the Second Amendment, which is arguably, the solely the one right that defends every other right in the Constitution. And you're taxing it.
Yeah.
Well, Chief Justice John Marshall back in 1819 said the power to tax includes the power to destroy. If you can tax something, you can do it legitimately within the law, then you can eliminate it. And therefore, in my opinion, taxation of a constitutional right, especially after the Heller decision of 2008 that declared the Second Amendment to be an individual constitutional right, then taxing an individual constitutional right, regardless of any good reason that you might be doing it, taxing a constitutional right then becomes unconstitutional.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's simply not legal to do it. And if you're in now, currently, the taxes go toward a good thing, which is wildlife preservation, Pittman Robertson, and that's fine. But you can't tax a constitutional right, regardless of how good, what good thing the tax is doing. And then you also run the risk of if the Supreme Court, if a case ever goes to the court, and they concur that taxing a constitutional right is illegal, is unconstitutional, just like you can't tax the right to vote, then the funding source for Pittman Robertson, the taxes on the Second Amendment, would immediately evaporate. And so you would now put wildlife conservation, the whole Pittman Robertson Act would be well, it would be eliminated basically, and that
Right.
would put wildlife conservation in danger. So there really needs to be a different funding source for wildlife conservation other than taxing of a constitutional right. So, there's problems on both sides. One, it's not legal. And two, it puts Pittman Robertson in grave danger, in my
Yeah.
opinion. So I think that the Return Our Constitutional Rights Act is both protecting the Second Amendment of the Constitution, and it's also protecting wildlife preservation by finding a better funding source for it than taxes on a constitutional right.
So I agree 100%. One of the things that I love about the Pittman Robertson Act is that it's the people that are involved in it on a daily basis. It's the hunters, it's the shooters that are directly funding the wildlife management that they're enjoying. I do agree 100% that there is a lot of problems with that in the sense, what you just explained, that it could go away instantly, or it's a way that the opposition can instantly pull those funds and put it into the general, pull those funds out of the general fund versus allowing the people that were walking around Safari Club International this weekend, they're the ones that are actually funding their wildlife management and North American wildlife management plan. Do you have, or have you guys heard, or have you talked about a different way to fund wildlife that still involves the participants?
Well, I mean, you could certainly make it voluntary. I mean, there's nothing that means that hunters couldn't still fund it. They could certainly set up some sort of a website, and every time, you go buy ammunition or you go buy a firearm or something like that, you could contribute to that, and then you would know for a fact that the people who support hunting and who support wildlife conservation are indeed the ones who are funding it.
Yes.
But, I would arguably say, in my experience as a federal firearms licensee, and looking at how much ammunition is sold that's non-hunting ammunition, that's really target practice, it's full metal jacket ammunition, not soft point or ballistic tip or something like that. And then you look at the firearms that are sold that cannot be used for hunting, like pistols and 22 caliber rifles, rimfire rifles, and all those sorts of things all those sorts of firearms that are just not suitable as a hunting type firearm. All the excise tax paid by those folks goes, to Pittman Robertson, but they really don't participate in that.
Yes.
So in reality, I would say probably 20% of the total funds that go to Pittman Robertson are actually come from those who are involved in wildlife conservation or are involved in hunting. And the vast majority is not.
Yeah.
And so, there's a disparity there. So those people who are funding it really don't have, the majority of them don't have a seat at the table,
Yeah.
because they're not interested in the table. Um,
I heard I was at a show, I was at a hunting expo in Salt Lake a few weeks ago, and I was sitting at a round table with the head of the Forest Service and the head of BLM, and they were talking about the money that they're pulling out, and putting it back into conservation and specifically habitat management out west. And the number that came out from an executive at one of the firearms companies and an ammunition company was 60% of the ammunition that's purchased was not purchased for the intent of hunting, was not purchased for anything about wildlife, which that's a huge number when you think of the billions that act generates, or that tax generates every single year. That's a huge number that is dumped into wildlife that has no intent to be used in the field that way. And I think 100% right. And that also, back to your first point, also brings up how it could disappear very quickly. If that 60% said, we don't want to do this anymore, or they, say we're not funding that anymore. We want to fund, public shooting ranges on BLM, or public shooting ranges at Forest Service trailheads, or whatever. We want that money to be funded there. And they have in my opinion, that's an arguable contention in it, and it should be done that way. They're using their tax dollars to benefit what they're paying for. So that's a very valid point, that it needs to be back to the individuals that are using. And there's a lot of us, there's a lot of us that hunt, you, me, and about, 100 or about 28 million other people that are hunting, that should be putting back into that. So I appreciate that. What are some of the other things that you're facing there at DC, that our audience, and we'll get to what my audience can do with, helping you with these, but what are some of the other problems that you're facing, or fights that you're facing, or good things that are happening there?
Well, let me address one more point here, and that is that, when you talk to DNR and you talk to those who have influence in the Bureau of Land Management, what you're finding is that the politicians are putting people in those positions that really don't care about hunting. They care about wildlife, but they don't care about hunting. And a great example of that is now on federal land, that traditional hunting ammunition is banned from federal hunting preserves. And we saw that happen last year because you have radical leftists getting on these boards in positions of influence. And it's not the punters, and it's not the people who are actually paying into it at all, but it's the radical leftists.
Yeah.
So they're having what I would call undue influence through political pressure or through political appointments, and that's not helping the hunting industry whatsoever. So that's just a point I wanted to make.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
So on to your other question about kind of what else we're seeing here in Washington, D.C. Well, I'll tell you that it is gravely concerning to me that the left is still, focused on increasing the taxation, because they're going to use the tool of taxation to eliminate the constitutional right, the Second Amendment right. We saw that last year when a bill was introduced to increase, the 10% or the 11% Pittman-Robertson tax to 1,000%.
Yeah.
Which would have made $1,000 gun cost $11,000. And it's insane. But if you can tax a firearm or ammunition just a little bit, then what prevents you from taxing it a lot and taxing it completely out of existence? Yeah. And that's a pathway that I don't want the left to have. And so that's one of the other reasons for the Return Our Constitutional Rights Act, and why it is so important that bill pass. And we protect and defend our Second Amendment even more.
So how far along is that bill? I know you introduced it last year. How far along is it, and what can my audience do to help further that?
Well, we have not yet introduced it again this year, but it is certainly on the docket for me to do that. We're going to change it up a little bit, I think, this year. and we're going to put a little more explanation in the front of it so people better understand what the bill is really all about. And but I will promise you this: one of the things that I made was a promise to my district, and that I would protect and defend the Second Amendment, and I would help restore it back to its original intent. We have had gun control after gun control after gun control act or law infringe upon our Second Amendment rights, and those infringements need to be removed. And the Return Our Constitutional Rights Act is one of the ways of removing some of those infringements. Well, when folks hear about it, then respond to it positively and encourage their member of Congress to support it. And I will certainly let you know as soon as we introduce it, and would love to have some maybe an opportunity to come back on and talk about it. That we have introduced it. Last year when I introduced it, I had over 50 Republicans as co-sponsors of it, and I'm excited that when we reintroduce it again this year, that we will have at least that amount of support.
We would love to have you back on, and we'll describe that and talk about that in more depth, as well as what can be done and how far along it's going, as well as I would love to write in. We have a huge audience that we do a lot of blogs and media, and I would love to inform them through those aspects and those medias, and then obviously get them in contact with their representative and down the road hopefully their senator. And we can get this thing done. I appreciate your time very much. I know you're a very busy individual there. You got a lot of fights, and I don't want to take too much of your time. I do appreciate your time, and thank you for coming on and discussing. I have one question for you, and hopefully I don't sideswipe you with this, but what keeps you in D.C.? I know it is not easy, and that is living. It is the valley of shadow of death. I know. What keeps you there, Congressman?
Well, I'll tell you that it is a struggle. It's hard on my family, and as it is with all the members here, it's just hard on family life because you're separated so much. And but I'll tell you that I know what I'm doing is the right thing. I believe that God put me here for such a time as this, with my experience, the way He has helped craft my life and put me in the different places where He has put me, either my military service or as a federal firearms licensee, or my experience with the Internal Revenue Service, which is a story in and of itself.
Well, I'd love to hear that one next time.
Well, next time we will, but it's a good one. It's a really good one. You'll love it.
I call him the KGB.
It's one of the things that helped put me right here in Congress. But I'm a fighter. I've always been a fighter. And I love to fight for the right things, and that energizes me. I've never been one to give up easily or to quit. Never give up is my kind of. I should put that on above my doorpost, but that's just kind of been. I've been persistent to a fault all my life, and I enjoy defending our Constitution and making sure that people have liberty and freedom like God intended us to have. And so that's where the fight comes from, and that's the source of the strength. And that's why I stay in D.C.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you being there and others like you. And if there's anything you need from us, if it's even a phone call, hey, what do you think about this? Please reach out. I would love to have those conversations. So thank you very much. Have a great day, folks. Again, reach out to your congressman and talk about those issues and let them know where you thought and what you think of. So thank you, Congressman.
Thank you very much, Ike.
Hey folks, thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You got to hang out with some of the people that I think are the most interesting I've ever met. And remember, fair chase is the only way to hunt and take trophy big game. See you next time right here on Eastman's Podcast Edition.